This is Jorge Economics. So in the last few videos, we looked at the underlying cause of the crises we're about to experience, which is we've got a lot of debt and not a lot of income. And in the last video, we saw that Australia's private debt as a percentage of GDP was over 210%, which means we've got a lot of debt and not a lot of income to pay that debt. And the crisis is going to be very, very harsh because there's more debt to pay off. So, this video, we're going to look at 3 reasons why Australia's crisis, Australia's debt contraction, is going to be a lot worse than other countries. So the first reason we touched on in the last video is that in 2008, during the GFC, Australia largely avoided paying back any debt. What we did was to avoid people defaulting, to avoid people getting squeezed too much because they had a lot of debt and a lot of income. The central bank, the Reserve Bank of Australia, rapidly lowered interest rates. What that did was it temporarily eased the debt to income ratios. It lowered the debt to income ratios. Think of it like putting a band-aid on a gash. It's a horrible solution for the long term. It makes the problem worse, but in the short term, it helps. And how it helps is because when you lower interest rates, you're easing the amount of debt you need to pay back. You're easing the servicing costs, the interest repayments, so that eases the debt burdens. And when you lower interest rates, you're also raising the value of people's assets because assets are calculated using interest rates. That's how you calculate the present value of an asset. So when you lower interest rates, bam, you ease debt to income ratios. But it's temporary, it doesn't fix the problem. So Australia, unlike all these other countries, during the GFC, we just kept accumulating debt. All these other countries like America and whatnot that had a recession, they got a chance to pay back some of their debt. They got a chance to close that gap by paying back debt. Australia didn't pay back any debt. We just temporarily closed the gap by lowering interest rates. So we have a lot more debt than every other country because we never paid it back during the GFC. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that we have an extremely large financial sector, an extremely large banking sector. That's very closely tied to our property bubble. So these banks, these Australian banks, over the last 30 years, have been lending to people that they probably shouldn't have been lending to. They've been lending to Australians for mortgages that didn't really have the income to service the debt that the bank was giving them. And so during the upturn phase, during the credit expansion phase, that's okay because they get to make more profits, right? Because a bank, how they make profit is they get interest on the loans they give. So if they give more loans, to people, they get more money, they get more profits. But the problem is when those loans inevitably get defaulted on, inevitably because the borrower doesn't have the income to service the debt, then the bank is going to have a lot of problems with liquidity and solvency. They're going to have a lot of their money that's owed to them disappear because the borrowers default. And there's going to be a massive banking crisis because they're very exposed to the bad debt. So reason number 2 is that our banking sector is very large and vulnerable and it's exposed to bad debt in the property bubble. So if the property bubble deflates, which it will, then the banking sector is going to have a lot of problems. It's going to crash, and I'll explain that in further videos. Problem number 3 is that our property bubble is largely funded by a foreign investment bubble. How our property prices are so high, one of the reasons, is the government allows a lot of foreigners to invest in Australian property. Now this is all well and good during the upturn phase because all these foreigners are putting all this new money into the property market. It's all well and good. But the problem is if these foreign investors decide to sell their Australian properties, they need to convert out of the Australian currency. So they need to sell Australian dollars. And this puts pressure on our currency. This puts downward pressure on the price of our currency. So by having a foreign investment bubble that funds the property bubble, our currency is exposed to pullback. So our currency could crash because if foreign investors decide to withdraw their money from Australia, it's going to really impact the price of our currency. It's going to make our currency worth less because everyone's trying to sell it. And that leads to serious inflation. So to summarize this video, reason number 1 why Australia's crisis will be worse than other countries is we didn't get a chance to pay back our debt during the GFC. We just kept accumulating debt. So our debt to income ratios are a lot larger. Reason number 2, we have a very large banking sector that's in a bubble, and it's closely tied in with the property bubble. So if the property bubble has problems, if people start defaulting on their mortgages, the Australian banks are in a lot of trouble. They're in a lot of trouble. Reason number 3 is that our property bubble is funded by a foreign investment bubble. We are reliant on foreign investment. So if foreign investment ceases, if foreign investors pull their money out, it's going to really damage our currency. It's going to put downward pressure on our currency, which leads to inflation. Hopefully you found this video useful. The next few videos will expand upon these 3 points. Thank you for watching.